The smell of molten metal and coolant fluid filled Bay 62. Cade wiped the sweat from his brow, leaving behind a greasy smudge that joined countless others on his weathered face. His calloused hands worked methodically, muscle memory guiding the plasma torch across the armor panel. The maintenance bay hummed with the familiar sounds of machinery, the whirring of diagnostic tools, the hiss of pressure seals, the occasional curse from a fellow technician wrestling with uncooperative equipment. Just another day in orbit, Cade muttered to himself. A mantra he'd repeated so often it had lost all meaning. The celestial nomad, once a proud warship of the Galactic Concordat, now served as a diplomatic vessel, ferrying representatives between the scattered remnants of humanity and their alien counterparts. Its glory days were long past, much like Cade's. At 42, he'd spent 20 years mending the armor and weapons of those deemed more important than himself. 20 years of patching, welding, calibrating, always in service to others, never for his own advancement. Cade adjusted the gravity controls in his section, reducing them to 30% normal. The armor component he was working on, a complex neural interface module, floated gently before him, rotating slowly as he examined it from all angles. The damage was substantial. Circuitry melted, biometric sensors fused, power cells depleted. Someone had taken a hell of a beating. "Hey, Merrick," Cade called out to his supervisor, a squat man with more metal than flesh in his left arm. "Who does this belong to? Imperial Guard? Mercenary outfit?" Merrick didn't look up from his terminal. "Bay 62, special client. Eyes down, mouth shut." Cade frowned. Bay 62 was reserved for VIPs, high-ranking officials, diplomats, occasionally royalty. The maintenance request had come through with maximum priority, but minimum details. Unusual, but not unheard of. The celestial nomad played host to all manner of secretive individuals, each with their own reasons for discretion. As he worked, Cade couldn't help but note the peculiarities of the armor. It was old, ancient by modern standards, yet the technology was surprisingly advanced. Layers of responsive alloys that predated current manufacturing techniques. Crystalline power nodes that hummed with energy, even in their damaged state. Most intriguing were the etched glyphs that ran along the inner surface, reminiscent of the lost script of Akamar, a civilization destroyed in the collapse wars nearly a century ago. Cade had studied such artifacts in his youth, before disillusionment set in. He dreamed of being a xenoarchaeologist, exploring the ruins of fallen civilizations across the stars. Instead, he'd settled for a life of maintenance and repair, letting his intellectual curiosity wither in favor of reliable employment. The ship's intercom crackled. "Attention all personnel! Transitioning to artificial night cycle in 15 minutes. All non-essential systems will power down accordingly." Cade glanced at the chronometer. He'd been working for 6 hours straight without realizing it. The armor module was nearly repaired, but he'd need to complete the calibration sequence before returning it. As the bay lights dimmed around him, signaling the approach of the artificial night, he found himself alone with the mysterious piece of equipment. He was so engrossed in his work that he didn't notice the bay doors sliding open, didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across his workstation. "Is it finished?" The voice was female, melodic yet commanding. Cade looked up, startled. She stood tall and regal in the dim light, clad in partial battle armor that matched the component he was repairing. The armor was scarred and pitted, telling tales of countless battles, yet it retained an elegant, almost architectural quality. Her face remained partially obscured by a retractive helm, but Cade could make out high cheekbones, piercing violet eyes, and skin the color of burnished copper. Her hair, where visible, was a cascade of silver white, intricately braided with tiny crystalline beads that caught what little light remained in the bay. "Nearly," Cade replied, regaining his composure. The neural interface was severely damaged, I've replaced the primary circuits and recalibrated the biometric sensors. Should be fully functional now. He gestured to the floating component. May I? The woman nodded, stepping closer and removing her gauntlets. As Cade carefully reattached the module to her chest plate, he noticed the unusual warmth emanating from the armor, as if it were alive. The connection points sealed seamlessly, the entire suit momentarily illuminating with a network of glowing lines before returning to its battle-worn appearance. The calibration sequence will take a few minutes, Cade explained, activating the final diagnostic. You've got quite a unique setup here. Haven't seen integration this complex since. Well, never, actually. The woman didn't respond immediately, instead closing her eyes as the armor synchronized with her body. Cade watched in fascination as minute adjustments rippled across the surface, the metal flowing like liquid before hardening again. When she opened her eyes, they glowed with the same intensity as the armor's power nodes. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying an unexpected weight. "For fixing my armor." It was a simple expression of gratitude, yet something in her tone caused the bay lights to flicker. The air seemed to vibrate with unspoken significance. Before Cade could respond, the main bay doors slid open again. A group of soldiers entered, a mixed unit of humans and Zarians, the reptilian species known for their unquestioning loyalty to the Concordat. They stopped abruptly upon seeing the armored woman. What happened next would forever be etched in Cade's memory. One by one, the soldiers dropped to one knee, heads bowed in perfect unison. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines and the rhythmic breathing of those present. Cade stood frozen, hydrospanner still in hand, as more crew members filed into the bay, engineers, technicians, medical staff, all kneeling without a word, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some made elaborate gestures across their chests, ancient signs of reverence whose meanings had been lost to time. "What the hell is going on?" Cade whispered, too shocked to maintain protocol. The woman turned to him, her expression unreadable. "They remember," she said simply. Before Cade could ask what exactly they remembered, the crowd parted to admit a man in the midnight blue uniform of a fleet commander, Commander Vax, head of security aboard the Celestial Nomad. A man known for his ruthless efficiency and uncompromising adherence to protocol. Vax did not kneel. "Security breach in Maintenance Bay 62, he announced, his voice hard as he addressed the woman. "You were to remain in your designated quarters until the summit. I must insist you return immediately, under escort." The woman regarded him coolly. "My armor required attention. Your facilities were inadequate." "Nevertheless," Vax persisted, "protocol dictates—" She silenced him with a single raised hand, the gesture so imperious that even the commander faltered mid-sentence. "I will not be detained," she stated, her tone brooking no argument. "Not until the calibration is complete." She turned to Cade. "How much longer?" Cade swallowed. Suddenly aware that he stood at the center of a political situation he didn't understand. 5 minutes. Maybe less. "Then I will wait 5 minutes," she informed Vax. "Your protocols can wait as well." The tension in the bay was palpable. Vax's jaw worked as he visibly wrestled with his options. Finally, he inclined his head. Not quite a bow, but a reluctant acknowledgement. 5 minutes, he conceded. "Then, you will be escorted to the council chamber." His gaze shifted to Cade. "You, technician, when you're finished, report to security for debriefing." With that, Vax departed, taking most of the security detail with him. The remaining crew members gradually dispersed, though many cast lingering glances at the woman, their expressions a mixture of hope and uncertainty. As the bay emptied, Cade found himself alone again with the mysterious figure. The diagnostic program beeped, indicating completion. "Calibration's done," he announced, disconnecting his tools. Everything's green across the board. Whatever this armor is, it's now functioning at optimal capacity. Good. The woman flexed her gauntleted hands, the armor moving as naturally as skin. I need access to the council chamber, not through the main corridors. Cade blinked. Excuse me. You know this ship, she stated, rather than asked. Its passages. Its secrets. I require discreet passage to the summit level. Look, I don't know who you are or what's happening here, but I'm just a technician. Getting involved in whatever this is could cost me my position. The woman regarded him for a long moment. Then, with deliberate movements, she removed her helm completely. Cade's breath caught in his throat. Without the helm's shadow, her features were striking, almost unnaturally perfect, yet marked by a profound weariness. A thin scar ran from her left temple to her jaw, silver against her copper skin. But most remarkable was the intricate circlet that crowned her head, a delicate web of living metal that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. My name is Saria, she said, her voice softer now. Last daughter of House Akamar, keeper of the Seven Seals, rightful sovereign of the luminous throne. She stepped closer, close enough that Cade could see flecks of gold in her violet irises. And you are more than just a technician. Cade Lorenz, former graduate of the Xenoarchaeological Academy, specialist in pre-collapse artifacts and integration technologies, author of Echoes in the Void, Cultural Remnants of the Akamarian Dynasty. Cade stared at her, stunned. How do you know about a thesis written 20 years ago by a promising scholar who vanished into the ranks of starship maintenance crews? Saria's mouth curved in a slight smile. Because it was the only truthful account of my people's history published since our fall. The implications staggered him. The Akamarian dynasty had been the height of human civilization before the Collapse Wars, a golden age of art, science, and interstellar harmony. According to official records, the entire royal lineage had been eradicated when their homeworld was destroyed. If this woman truly was who she claimed. The council chamber, Cade found himself saying, I can get you there through the maintenance tunnels, but there are security checkpoints, drone patrols. My armor will shield us from standard scans, Saria replied. For more sophisticated measures, we'll need to be creative. Cade nodded. Decision made. This way. He led her to a service hatch at the rear of the bay, punching in his access code. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage bathed in the dull red glow of emergency lighting. These tunnels run through the entire ship, Cade explained as they entered, the hatch sealing behind them. Maintenance uses them to access critical systems without disrupting the main areas. They're not exactly comfortable, but they're discreet. The passage was indeed cramped, forcing them to proceed in single file. Cade went first, navigating the labyrinthine network with the ease of long familiarity. The walls thrummed with the ship's pulse. Power conduits, water recyclers, atmospheric processors all working in concert to keep the massive vessel functioning. You've been hiding in plain sight, Cade said as they walked, curiosity overcoming his better judgment. All these years, everyone thought the Akamarian line was extinct. That was the intention, Saria replied, her armor occasionally scraping against the narrow walls. After the bombardment of Akamar Prime, those of us who survived scattered across the galaxy. Some sought refuge with allied worlds. Others disappeared into the anonymous masses of space stations and colony ships. And you? I was 7 when they came for my family. My mother, the Queen Regent, placed me in stasis within a diplomatic vessel, programmed to reach our most distant outpost. By the time I emerged, 20 years had passed. The outpost was abandoned, our empire in ruins, and I was presumed dead along with the rest of my line. Cade paused at a junction, checking for drone activity before proceeding. So, why come out of hiding now, after all this time? Because the lies have festered long enough, Sarya said, her voice hardening. The Concordat that rose from our ashes claims to preserve our legacy, while systematically erasing our truths. They've rewritten history, portrayed my ancestors as tyrants who brought destruction upon themselves. She gestured to the ship around them. Even this vessel, the Celestial Nomad, was once the royal flagship of Akamar, renamed and repurposed after our fall. They reached a vertical shaft with maintenance rungs embedded in the wall. Cade began to climb, Sarya following close behind. The summit that begins tomorrow, she continued, will determine the future governance of the outer reaches, territories that once formed the heart of Akamarian space. I cannot allow decisions about my people's homeworlds to be made without the truth being known. As they ascended through the levels of the ship, the architecture began to change subtly. The utilitarian metal gave way to more organic structures, walls reinforced with living wood, lighting provided by bioluminescent panels. This section of the Celestial Nomad retained elements of its original Akamarian design, where technology and nature existed in harmony. Cade emerged onto a platform overlooking a vast atrium. The space was filled with massive root-like structures that curved upward to form natural archways and buttresses. Soft blue light pulsed through crystalline veins embedded in the living architecture, creating an ethereal atmosphere. "The Heart Grove," Sarya whispered, her eyes widening as she took in the sight. "It survived." "It's off-limits to most of the crew," Cade explained. "Something about the bioengineered systems being unstable. Maintenance only comes here when absolutely necessary." Sarya stepped forward, placing her armored hand against one of the massive roots. The crystalline veins brightened in response, pulsing in a distinct pattern. Throughout the atrium, similar pulses answered, creating a symphony of light that raced along the organic network. "They remember me," she said, wonder in her voice. Before Cade could ask what she meant, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. A security drone hovered at the far end of the atrium, its scanning beam sweeping methodically across the space. "Down!" Cade hissed, pulling Sarya behind a thick root cluster. The drone paused, its algorithms detecting the anomaly. With mechanical precision, it altered course, heading directly for their hiding place. "It's a Mark 7, Cade whispered. "Advanced detection systems, neural network targeting. If it identifies you—" "It won't," Sarya assured him, placing her palm against the root once more. The crystalline veins pulsed rapidly, the pattern spreading throughout the atrium. Suddenly, every bioluminescent node flared simultaneously, flooding the vast space with blinding blue light. The drone faltered, its sensors overwhelmed by the unexpected illumination. It hovered uncertainly, running diagnostics as its systems attempted to compensate. Cade felt Sarya's hand close around his wrist. "Now," she commanded, pulling him from their hiding place. They ran across the atrium, weaving between the massive roots as the drone struggled to reorient itself. Reaching a seamless panel in the far wall, Sarya pressed her armored palm against it. The surface recognized her touch, spiraling open to reveal a hidden passage. They slipped through just as alarms began to sound throughout the ship. The panel sealed behind them, muffling the klaxons, but not silencing them entirely. "They know you're missing," Cade stated the obvious, trying to catch his breath. "Yes." Sarya's expression was grim. "We must hurry." The passage they now traversed was unlike any Cade had seen before. The walls were lined with a pearlescent material that seemed to shift and flow, responding to their presence. Ghostly images flickered across the surface, star maps, architectural diagrams, faces of people long dead. "Memory silk," Sarya explained, noting his fascination. "A technology unique to Akamar. It records impressions, preserves moments in time. These passages were used by the royal family to move throughout the ship unseen. As they walked, the images grew more coherent, responding to Sarya's proximity. Cade glimpsed scenes of a world he'd only read about, towering crystal spires rising from verdant forests, Vast plazas, filled with beings of diverse species. Celebration and ceremony conducted beneath twin moons. Akamar Prime, he breathed, recognizing the legendary capital from ancient records. As it was, Sarya confirmed, her voice tight with emotion. Before the betrayal, the passage began to slope upward, the memory silk giving way to more conventional materials as they approached the upper levels of the ship. Ahead, a circular door blocked their path, its surface inscribed with intricate patterns that matched those on Sarya's armor. "The council chamber lies beyond," she said, pausing before the door. "Once I enter, there will be no turning back. The truth will emerge, and the consequences will reverberate throughout the known worlds." Cade hesitated. "What happens if they reject your claim? The Concordat has ruled for nearly a century. Entrenched powers don't surrender authority willingly." "They need not surrender it," Sarya replied. "Only acknowledge it was never truly theirs." She studied him with those piercing violet eyes. "You need not accompany me further. Cade Lorenz, you've fulfilled your obligation by repairing my armor and guiding me here. What follows is political, not technical." Cade considered his options. He could return to the maintenance bay, claim he'd been coerced or deceived. Commander Vax would be suspicious, but without proof of willing collaboration, the worst punishment would be demotion or transfer. He could resume his life of quiet anonymity, fixing things that others deemed important. Or he could step through that door and witness history. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. After 20 years studying artifacts of a lost civilization, Cade said with a wry smile, "I think I'd like to see the real thing in action." Sarya inclined her head, the ghost of a smile playing at her lips. She placed her palm against the door, which recognized her touch immediately. The intricate patterns illuminated, tracing fiery lines across the surface before the entire structure dissolved into motes of light. Beyond lay the council chamber, a vast circular room dominated by a central table of polished obsidian. Embedded in the table's surface was a holographic projection system, currently displaying a three-dimensional map of the outer reaches. Around it sat 24 figures representing the major powers of the known galaxy: human colonial governors, Zarian war priests, Voludian trade ministers, even a few representatives of the enigmatic Myriad Collective. At the head of the table, occupying what had once been the monarch's position, sat High Chancellor Nerium, supreme leader of the Galactic Concordat. His aged face registered shock as Sarya and Cade entered through a doorway many had forgotten existed. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" he demanded, rising from his seat. "Security!" Guards positioned around the perimeter of the chamber moved forward, weapons raised. Commander Vax emerged from a side entrance, his expression darkening when he saw Cade. "The summit is closed to unauthorized personnel," Vax stated coldly. "Both of you will be detained and—" "You will stand down, Commander." Sarya's voice cut through the chamber like a blade, amplified by some property of her armor. "I am not unauthorized. I am Sarya Akamar, rightful heir to the luminous throne, and this council exists only by the authority vested in my bloodline." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Some exchanged knowing glances. Others looked confused or skeptical. The High Chancellor's face had gone pale. "Preposterous!" he sputtered. "The Akamarian line was extinguished decades ago. This is clearly an impostor seeking to disrupt our proceedings." "Am I?" Sarya stepped forward, her armor illuminating with the same network of light Cade had observed earlier. The pattern was mirrored in the chamber itself, crystalline veins in the walls and ceiling awakening after years of dormancy. "This vessel recognizes its true master, as do those who serve aboard it." As if on cue, the chamber doors opened to admit a procession of crew members, the same individuals who had knelt in the maintenance bay. They lined the walls of the chamber, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. A Zarian war priest rose from the council table, his scaled skin gleaming in the crystalline light. High Chancellor, if I may, the resemblance is undeniable. She bears the features of Queen Lyra, whom many of us remember from the final days of the old regime. Resemblance proves nothing, the Chancellor countered. And memory is malleable, especially after so many years. Then perhaps this will prove more convincing, Sarya replied. She turned to Cade. Show them. Cade stepped forward, suddenly aware of the attention focused on him. From his pocket, he withdrew a small device, the diagnostic tool he'd used to calibrate Sarya's armor. It contained a complete scan of the neural interface, including the unique biometric signatures embedded within. The armor worn by Sarya Akamar contains integration technologies that respond only to the royal bloodline, he explained, projecting the diagnostic results above the council table. The neural pathways, the genetic markers, the crystalline resonance patterns, all consistent with historical records of Akamarian biotechnology. I've spent 2 decades studying such artifacts. This is not a reproduction or a clever forgery. It is genuine, and it functions only for its rightful bearer. The council chamber fell silent as the delegates studied the projected data. Technical authenticators were summoned, analyses performed, comparisons made with historical records. Throughout the process, Sarya stood unwavering, her regal bearing a stark contrast to Cade's more utilitarian presence. Finally, a Voludian minister spoke, her melodious voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The evidence is compelling. The biorhythmic signatures match those in our ancestral archives. If this is deception, it is beyond any technology known to exist. One by one, the delegates voiced similar conclusions. The technical evidence, combined with the ship's unexpected response to Sarya's presence, painted an incontrovertible picture. Only the High Chancellor and his immediate subordinates maintained their skepticism, their faces growing increasingly troubled as consensus built against them. Even if we accept your identity, the Chancellor said finally, it changes nothing. The Akamarian dynasty fell through its own hubris. The Concordat rose to restore order to a galaxy in chaos. We have ruled justly for nearly a century. Have you? Sarya's question hung in the air. You've ruled by erasing the truth, by painting my family as tyrants, when it was your ambition that destroyed Akamar Prime, by claiming to preserve our legacy, while systematically dismantling everything we built. She gestured to the holographic map, hovering above the table. Look at the outer reaches, once prosperous worlds reduced to resource extraction outposts. Look at the border conflicts, the displaced populations, the suppression of technologies deemed unstable because they threatened your control. The Chancellor's face contorted with rage. You dare lecture us on governance? Your family's obsession with biological technology created weapons that nearly destroyed civilization itself. The collapse wars were the direct result of Akamarian excess. A convenient narrative, Sarya replied coolly. But false. The living weapons deployed against our worlds were not of our making. They were prototypes developed in secret by Concordat scientists, tested on Akamar Prime when my mother refused your demands for technological surrender. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward, suddenly intensely interested. You have no proof of these allegations, the Chancellor hissed. But I do. Sarya turned to the assembled crew members, lining the walls. Many aboard this vessel served during the final days of Akamar. They witnessed the truth, though they were sworn to silence under penalty of death. An elderly officer stepped forward, a woman with the insignia of a medical director on her uniform. I was chief xenobiologist when the attack occurred, she stated, her voice quavering but determined. The bioweapons deployed against Akamar Prime bore Concordat security signatures. I preserved the evidence, hidden within the ship's medical database, encoded in radiation treatment protocols where no one would think to look. Other crew members came forward, each offering pieces of testimony long suppressed. A communications officer who had intercepted the attack orders, an engineer who had been forced to modify concordant weapons for biological delivery, a security officer who had been ordered to eliminate witnesses. With each testimony, the Chancellor's position weakened. The delegates, many representing worlds that had once been Akamarian allies, exchanged troubled glances. The narrative that had shaped galactic politics for decades was unraveling before their eyes. In desperation, the Chancellor activated his communication implant. "Security override Omega. Deploy containment protocol in the Council chamber immediately." Alarm sirens wailed throughout the ship. From concealed panels in the ceiling, security drones descended, not the standard models that patrolled the corridors, but combat variants equipped with neural disruptors and containment fields. "The Council is now under protection," the Chancellor announced, his confidence returning. "This disruption has gone far enough. The alleged Akamarian heir and her accomplice will be detained pending full investigation." The drones formed a perimeter around Saria and Cade, neural disruptors powering up with an ominous hum. The crew members who had testified found themselves similarly contained, separated from the council table by a barrier of hovering machines. Cade felt a moment of panic. His technical knowledge extended to armor and weapons, not security countermeasures. They had come so close to revealing the truth, only to be thwarted by the Chancellor's desperation. Then he remembered the diagnostic tool still in his hand, the simple device he'd used to calibrate Saria's armor. Within it remained a direct connection to the armor systems, including its defensive capabilities. As the drones closed in, Cade quickly adjusted the tool's settings, amplifying the signal to maximum strength. He pressed the activation sequence just as the first neural disruptor fired. The beam never reached its target. Saria's armor flared with brilliant light, the defensive field expanding outward in a sphere that encompassed both of them. The neural disruptor energy was absorbed, channeled, and redirected in a cascading wave that swept through the chamber. Every drone froze in midair, their systems momentarily paralyzed by the unexpected feedback. The Chancellor's communication implant sparked painfully, forcing him to cry out and clutch his temple. In that moment of confusion, the Zarian war priest made a decision. He rose from the council table and crossed to where Saria stood within her protective field. With deliberate ceremony, he knelt before her, bowing his scaled head in the traditional gesture of his species. "The evidence is clear," he declared. "The heir has returned. The Concordat has ruled through deception. I, Sorix Tarn, representing the Zarian Dominion, acknowledge Saria Akamar as the rightful sovereign of the Luminous Throne and all territories once held under Akamarian protection." One by one, the other delegates rose from their seats. The Voludian minister was next to kneel, followed by representatives of the mining conglomerates, the colonial governors, even the enigmatic envoy from the Myriad Collective. Each spoke formal words of recognition, pledging fealty to the returned monarch. The High Chancellor watched in disbelief as his authority crumbled before him. The security forces, seeing the shift in power, lowered their weapons. Commander Vax, ever the pragmatist, ordered the remaining drones to stand down. Within minutes, the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Saria Akamar, last daughter of a dynasty thought extinct, stood at the center of a circle of kneeling delegates, representatives of powers that had spent decades trying to fill the void left by her family's fall. As the formal recognitions concluded, Saria turned to Cade, who had watched the proceedings with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Your contribution today extended far beyond repairing armor," she said, her voice pitched for his ears alone. "You repaired history itself." Cade shook his head, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had transpired. "I just did my job," he replied simply. "Fixed what was broken." Saria's lips curved in a genuine smile, the first he had seen from her. Sometimes that is all that's needed to change the course of worlds. Hours later, as the formal proceedings of transition continued in the council chamber, Cade found himself on the observation deck of the Celestial Nomad. The vast viewports offered an unobstructed view of the starfield beyond, countless points of light representing worlds that would soon learn of the dynasty's return. He heard soft footsteps approaching and turned to find Saria joining him. She had removed most of her armor, retaining only the crystalline circlet that marked her royal status. In its place, she wore a simple ship suit, practical rather than ceremonial. "Shouldn't you be overseeing the drafting of declarations or something equally momentous?" Cade asked, with a hint of his habitual cynicism. "The declarations can wait," Saria replied, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. "I wanted a moment to see the stars as they truly are, not through tactical displays or diplomatic filters." They stood in companionable silence, watching as a distant nebula caught the light of its central star, casting prismatic colors across the darkness. "What happens now?" Cade asked finally. "The Concordat won't surrender control easily, regardless of what was pledged in that chamber. There are military outposts, administrative centers, populations who have known no other authority for generations. Now comes the difficult part," Saria acknowledged. "Restoration is never as simple as recognition. There will be resistance, negotiation, compromise. The Akamarian dynasty I restore cannot be identical to the one that fell. Nor should it be. The galaxy has changed. I have changed." She turned to face him directly. "Which is why I need advisors who understand both worlds, the heritage we seek to reclaim, and the reality we must navigate." Cade raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job, Your Majesty?" "I'm offering you purpose," she corrected. "The chance to apply your knowledge of the past to shaping the future, to be more than just a technician again." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. To step from the shadows of maintenance bays into the light of historical significance. To help rebuild what he had spent decades studying in fragments and echoes. "I'm not much for politics," he warned her. "And I tend to speak my mind, regardless of who's listening." "Good," Saria replied with unexpected fervor. "I've had enough of sycophants and manipulators. I need truth-tellers at my side." Her expression softened slightly. "Besides, you've already seen me at my most vulnerable, reliant on your skills to repair my defenses. Few monarchs begin their reign with such humility." Cade couldn't help but laugh at that. "When you put it that way, it almost sounds like you planned it. Planned to have my ancient armor malfunction, requiring the assistance of the one person aboard who could both repair it and recognize its significance." Saria shook her head, a hint of mischief in her violet eyes. "That would be quite the elaborate scheme. But not impossible," Cade noted, studying her with newfound appreciation. Saria merely smiled enigmatically, turning back to the starfield. "The universe works in curious ways, Cade Lorenz. Sometimes the most important repairs are the ones we didn't know needed fixing." As they stood there, a brilliant light flared in the distance, a stellar beacon activated to signal the momentous news to the nearest Akamarian outpost. Within days, similar beacons would carry the message across the galaxy. The luminous throne was occupied once more. Cade watched the light pulse against the darkness, a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. He thought of the broken armor that had arrived in his bay, the mysterious woman who had thanked him for his repairs, the kneeling soldiers who had remembered what the rest of the galaxy had been forced to forget. In repairing her armor, he had helped repair something far greater, a fracture in history itself, a wound in the collective memory of civilization. It wasn't the destiny he had imagined for himself all those years ago when he'd written his thesis on a fallen dynasty, but standing here beside its returned heir, he found he couldn't imagine a more fitting path. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be part of this." Saria turned to him, her expression serene, yet determined. "This is only the beginning," she promised. "Together, We'll repair worlds. As the stellar beacon continued its rhythmic pulse, Cade felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, a sense of purpose greater than himself, a connection to both past and future. In the reflection of the viewport glass, he caught a glimpse of his own face, the customary cynical frown replaced by something approaching hope. Just another day in orbit? Not anymore. Not ever again. The repairs had only just begun,